Probably the question that has been asked the most amount of times over the year and a half or however long period of time it was already that I have started to film this game in the first place was which amulets should you choose and are the new amulets good for a monk? So in this video I'm going to debunk you the actual truth so I don't have to repeat myself to individual person over and over again. Therefore that's why this video is going to serve. And yes, just before we start, the new amulets are for monks. So as I've said, like, this question has been asked like a ton of times. Is it better than the old amulets? Is it worse? When the use case is better for which? Like, it really got some at some point. I just really didn't anymore know what to answer to people, because literally the answer is going to be the same for most of the classes except for one, which we are going to uncover in this video. Now, just a little intro. The amulets have been released sometimes around November or December 2019, and I don't know for other servers, but on our server specifically, I was the very first monk that started to do Daring Angel amulets. Now, sure, people have laughed at me a lot of times, told me that I have no clue what I was doing, this or that, but when it comes down now, turns out that I'm having a last laugh now, because there is still a crap ton of monks that don't have those amulets, and now they are starting to regret for not having them when they need them the most. So now on web you can actually find the stats for Daring Angel amulets, which is actually no problem whatsoever, so you just have to read the bonuses. So basically you have all over here on the open. So I'm going to go quickly through each individual level so you can kind of get the estimate, let's say idea how much they give per each level. So starting from level 1 we have 22 vitality only, level 2 is going to be only 33 vitality, level 3 is going to be 55 vitality, level 4 is going to be 77 vitality, and per 33 of each elemental damage, so that includes all 5 elements. Level 5 goes 110 vitality, 55 element damage. Then level 6, 135 vitality, 110 element damage, and here we come to the level 7, which is basically key point for a lot of the rings and amulets, where they get to make or break point. In this case, I'll say it right now, like, level 7 gives you mortality. And for people who know me, know how I view on mortality, and especially in PvE. Basically it sucks, it sabotages your damage, which I'm going to talk about in one of the future videos very soon, why mortality sucks in PvE, and there's one or two cases where mortality is actually good outside of PvP. So looking from that standpoint, this is only, let's say, dead point of the amulets, because if we go through quickly just through the rest of the levels, so level 8, 185 vitality, 220 element damage, so we can see here that up here from level 7 to level 8 the bonus of the elements damage really starts to ramp up. Same cases for level 9. 210 vitality, 300 elements damage, and of course mortality grows per 10. And here we get the bonus for every single class on level 10. Unlike the Lake Wave rings, which I have also video about why and where they are good for, there is no actually difference in vitality unlike on the rings, because if we remember in the rings video, the only difference that has in vitality is going to be the rings for the monk. However, in amulet's case there is no difference whatsoever, so basically all 5 classes get flat out same vitality bonus. Now, is it all that matter? Do monks get less vitality, or in this case even? it really doesn't, because it's only 10 vitality difference and that's like 50 HP, so it's really no big deal. And we can see the enormous bonus on the elements damage, which is going to be 420, and on the level 10 you also get 100 mortality, which converts in roughly about 2.7% if I'm not mistaken, something like that. I'm not sure, but it's around somewhere there. And now probably for the most important thing to which a lot of people are going to care about are the final bonuses. So in this case, unlike the new rings where they don't have the class specific bonus, amulets actually do. And to do a proper comparison, I have collected all 5 deep spring amulets for each class, so we can fairly compare where do the benefits go in which side, whether it's for the old amulets or the new amulets. However, before we go through that, let's just establish one thing. What actually do deep spring amulets give? So, you are going to get a vitality, you're going to get 7% of dodge, you're going to get 700 fire, or actually let's say 700 of elemental defense, which in turnabout is going to give you roughly about 2%, like when you add up all these 700 of elemental defense is going to add you up about 2%, so that means that's only per 1 amulet, so per 2 amulets you can get about almost 4%, because same case with elemental defense is as with the obduracies, the more you put on, the less you are going to get. And basically that's really all the major difference. Now, of course, we can see here that you get extra 10 vitality on each class compared to the old amulets. So therefore the already use case for Daring Angel amulets to have them on every single class, and why they are for everybody, is because you actually can use this extra 10 vitality to do a HP bug, which also there is a video coming about that, how to make it properly, how to increase your HP. Now some of you may say, well, but you get more HP with the deep spring amulets. What a lot of people do not consider is that this bonus that is flat out same for everybody increase 20% of HP. HP is not what bugs you the HP, it's the vitality that bugs you HP. So this is why for every single class, because you're going to get the exactly the same number of vitality, which is going to be 230, is higher naturally from 220. So therefore there is a use for everyone to have Daring Angel amulets if you for no other reason want them to increase your vitality. That is how you do. So basically you just put firstly the Darings on, and then you switch back to the actual vitality ones, or well, let's say I call them PvP vitality ones, because we are going to see in a second why. So first one, now also the Deep Spring amulets have a flat out bonus for everybody, that they are going to increase you also 20% of move speed and as well as the 20% of HP. So those two bonuses are flat out same for every single class. Now let's go through the individual bonuses one by one, and where personally in my opinion would be better which amulets for, let's say, majority of use case. So first up we got Fairy. So Deep Spring Amulet of Fairy says increase healing effect of skill healing spell by 236 points. However, for the amulets we get an increase of skill Lightning Slice by 200 points and White Lotus by 200 points. So if we look at it for what Fairy is mostly used for, that is healing. So naturally everyone should have Deep Spring amulets, because let's be honest, the main reason why Fairies get in the teams in the first place is to heal, and even in the PvPs They are also mostly used for healing. There is like very few fairies that actually run PvP, like that they attack, that they are pushing, being aggressive in wars or PKs or whatever, because most of the time you are going to just see a fairy on bot healing, whether it's K, whether it's war, or whatever use case there is. So if you are very heavy on HP and strictly healing fairy, you want to have always Deep Spring amulets or the old amulets. However, if you are a damage fairy, just as I have a plan to do one, you want actually the damage amulets, of course, because Lightning Slice and White Lotus are both short attacks, and those two attacks are always going to be used way more and way often than the longer attacks, because granted, longer attacks have bigger chance to be interrupted mid-casting, which for most of the time the short attacks are going to be almost never broken. Like, even if they do, they will probably be broken like maybe twice in like 50 or 60 hits at the most, and they won't be really broken. They will just be rolled back for a half a second so that you recast it again. But preferably as a fairy, you want to have Deep Spring amulets, because this healing bonus is going to matter a lot, as it's going to give you double the heal on the crit heal, which there is also a video that will be good to talk about sometimes in the future when I remember to do it, which I do have a plan. So either way, in most cases you want to have all the amulets on fairy above the damage ones, unless again if you are PvE damage fairy, which there were very few of them, and they do actually have those amulets, and they really do big increase and big results, especially for the pros, because pros really have their, let's say, unique mechanic with the applying the poison, but I'm not gonna go too much out of the way from the topic. So next up we have over here what seems to be a monk one. Now this is actually a good one. So for monk, decrease cooldown time of skill Buddha Quake by 15 seconds. So we can also see here one thing that I'm just noticing, that actually monk gets 10 HP higher, well actually vitality higher than from the old amulets. Now granted, this might be even a mistake, I'm not sure, because if it's the case that the amulets also give, and I should have probably checked this beforehand, but if the case is that even the Daring Angel amulets give extra vitality compared to the rest of the classes, to monks only, then this number would be probably 250. I will know once I develop my amulets to level 10, or if I find some monk on some other server with the level 10, because let's be honest, on our server I don't think there is maybe even 1 to 2 monks that have maxed out the damage amulets, and even if they do, they don't use them like at all, which is their undoing, but you know, you can't really teach everyone what's the proper way of playing a game. Anyhow, so PvE, actually those are PvP. Decrease cooldown time of skill Buddha Quake by 15 seconds. So Buddha Quake, we all know that this is a stun, and we can see that the here cooldown time is actually 1 minute and 30. So dropping it down for 15 seconds is literally not very that good, especially if we take in consideration that damage of Buddha Quake is equal to the one hit of the giant attack, or in the case of staff it's going to be equal damage to the damage of a fatal bash. And yes, the Buddha Quake, if you read in the skill, says Buddha skills, so therefore the direct damage of Buddha Quake is going to depend of your shovel, not about your staff, as naturally the description says. That's why you can do like 11 to 12k damage on crit with Buddha Quake under the shovel, while under the staff you might do at most like 7k or something like that, even if that much. While on the monks Daring Angel amulet side, we get increased damage of skill Fatal Burning by 150 points and Giant Health by 300 points. Now, increase damage of skill Fire Burning by 150 points. This description might sound a little bit confusing because this might make you think that increases the initial first hit of a burning by 150 points. However, that is not the case, and there's been confirmed by a lot of monks that had those amulets on other server. This increase is your burning dot effect. So let's say in my case the burning dot effect would be, let me switch on staff. We can see here that it does 7400 damage in 15 seconds. So if we divide that by 5 ticks, we get about something like 1480 damage per 1 tick. So if we add those 1480 tick damage per, let's say, each 3 seconds, plus this 150 is going to be ticking the burn effect per 1630. And this is very relevant on DR bosses, especially on Cinnabarasura, because I've said this a lot of times, probably I'm repeating myself like a parrot, but in case where boss is way higher level than you, burn will do you more aggro than the bash. Why is this the case? Is because bash as a solo skill has higher chance to miss on a bigger level difference compared to burning, because burning is covered by initial first hit, that if that hit misses, the burn effect will not miss. But of course, granted, it can happen that also the initial hit don't miss, but the burn will miss. So therefore, the chance for burning to miss is being cut by half, because it takes away by having to split the percentage with the initial hit. So therefore, the more consistent way of applying aggro, as I've said in Cinnabarasura, is with burning and not with the bash. At the very least, until the boss gets yellow level to us, or whichever boss already happens to be 6th boss, which is most likely going to be, let's say, 2 to 3 levels difference. Again, that's really expected. But in that case, yes, it will help you a lot. And giant health part, increasing by 300 points. Now this one isn't really useful, like, I'll be honest, as a shovel player. It's not really good. Like, sure, there are few niche PvE cases where you do want to use giant health, but ultimately you do not depend on giant health damage, you actually depend on giant attack and giant burst damage. So I guess this one is good for one-shotting some bosses or elites or something like that, if there is a quest to do something. Other than that, this really doesn't have all that much of a use. But where it actually does have a use that is not listed here, but this actually does work, is this increase of 420 elements damage. And why is that? We all know that staff has horrible aggro, especially in a lot of caves that are not high in damage resistance. So by swapping out the old amulets for new amulets and adding some more damage is going to increase your aggro multiplier, which is 4.4 times than the original damage, which I have probably mentioned maybe in 2 videos or something like that, that the aggro basically for staff, for every, let's say, 10,000 damage that staff does, you need 44,000 damage of any other weapon to have exactly the same aggro. And that way, that's why the lesser damage entire team puts out, the higher aggro chance for monk remains, because the magic damage is being modified ultimately with staff via the aggro modifiers which you have via bash point and via the mercy buff. So in this case, most amount of times you want to actually use to save monks and give them more purpose, you want to use the damage amulets. Next case is the Deep Spring amulet for assassin. So let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see better. Okay, so decrease cooldown time of skill Dragon Cry by 15 seconds. So this is basically a stun. Um, Again, this one is kind of hard to say because Assassin is bad class like for last 2 or 3 years. That last, whether you choose PvE or PvP, that's just bad. There's really no way around it. Now the main issue I have with this decrease cooldown time by 15 seconds is because unlike the Buddha Quake, which when you hit is actually a magic damage because it's modified by Buddha skills, the Dragon Cry damage is actually physical damage. So therefore any crit magic damage increase, like let's say for example this part will not boost you, or inlays will not boost you damage of Dragon Cry. I get it that ultimate Dragon Cry is just used as a stun, but while it's a stun it doesn't mean that it shouldn't do any significant damage. Like Buddha Quake does like 2.5 times more damage than Dragon Cry. Again, people really want to force Assassin to be strictly a PvP class, but then again they suck even in PvP and nobody really can tell me any different because I've seen it many times just being a punching bag. And really there's no other way around it. While for, let's be honest, for the PvE side or for the Daring Angel amulets, there's really not much better. Like increased damage of skill Rush Feint by 300 points or the Lightning Sweeping by 100 points. Like Rush Feint is a stun on dagger and the Lightning Sweeping is an AoE for Scimitar. Now the 1 point and one, let's say I guess, salvaging spot, so that you actually want to use damage amulets over the health ones, is because you get mortality here, right? That's 100 mortality. In the base, when you hit a mortal, so basically mortal ignores all magic damage modifiers, Scimitar will do higher mortal damage than dagger. A lot of people don't know that, but if you go and read the default damage numbers for Scimitar and dagger, you are going to see that Scimitar has higher basic numbers than dagger. That's why the only salvage point, and that's why I've seen some fully mortal Scimitar assassins do really well in PvP, surprisingly well. Not really against mana classes, but against the stamina classes they do extremely well, is by adding at most mortal as possible. Because again, mortal ignores everything, so basically magic damage goes into water when you use the mortal. Therefore, as the default damage is higher on Scimitar than on dagger, that's why Scimitar's mortal damage is going to be not all that much higher, but it's going to be already enough higher that you can spot a difference in mortal damage. And that's basically why I personally would choose the damage amulets for Assassin. Plus, it can salvage them some more damage, which they anyway are slow about, because I've said this in previous video where I've said why Assassin is horrible class when they need fix. Slow stamina recovery and high stamina skill, well actually high stamina consumption per skill is what makes assassins bad for the majority of time. And that's basically why I would prefer always the damage amulets over the health ones. Next up we got Deep Spring Amulet of Tamer. So let's see what do we get over here. Okay. Decrease cooldown time of skill Freezing Trap by 10 seconds. Whilst here we get increased damage skill of Spiny Crack by 150 points and Eagle Swoop by 300 points. This one, you can actually go both ways, and both ways I think about PvPs, and this is why. I get it that a lot of people still have issue, let's say, figuring out how the crossbow works, or they are not really fans of crossbow, but if you are on one-on-one, crossbow is just gonna win you the game if you are really good at it. I've seen this a couple of times, like where basically crossbow eats any class almost, maybe not only sword wizards, but that's really if the mortal is lucky on them. freeze trap, we all know that is very spammable skill. It's kind of like, I guess, crappy a little bit because it's easily destroyed, and kind of the freeze time is only holding you for 3 seconds, even if you destroy it, so it's really not really like... If you pair it up with the PCP reputation set, where you get some more cooldown time being cut off on the freezing trap, you, I guess, could pair it up. But then again, PCP reputation set is already outdated set, and it's being outshined by the DR set by far. Like, its DR set is just insane for Tamers, the PvE one. But here again we can see that Eagle Swoop increased by 300 points, and Eagle Swoop, the crossbow players know how good is this, especially when you pair it up with now MMC set, with the PCP drop set, and now with the DR drop set. Like, you get a decreased cooldown on Eagle Swoop, plus you get the damage on Eagle Swoop, so therefore Eagle Swoop automatically becomes way more accessible and way more spammable, and it's the higher damage hit than the, because the crossbow has the smaller hit and the higher hit, and Eagle Swoop is the higher or the bigger hit. Now, Spiny Crack, I think I forgot what this one does. I think it's the slowdown target, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't think this is AoE. If it is AoE, correct me down in the comments below, but I think this is the slowdown skill on bow, which really doesn't really get used like ever at all, unless it's again AoE. Then you can see, again, get the double use case for the PV and the PvP. Now, ultimately, which I would prefer for the Tamer, again, it would be Damage Amulet, because there is a lot more versatility out here than it is out here, especially because you can pair this amulet with the new set. Compared to this, you would have to really run with the old set, which by now, again, it's outshined by the new DR set by far, and you cannot just really be competitive with it anymore. And the last one, probably the most popular one, again, I get it why, because wizards are just so meta in PvP. Decrease cooldown time of skill Earth Feint by 5 seconds. If I'm not mistaken, Earth Feint is only 30-second cooldown stun, so chopping it down by 5 seconds even more makes Wizard very, very spammable and very control heavy. Like, whether you run sword or blade doesn't really matter, because stun is going to give you extra control even if you run a blade. While it's here, increase damage of skill fire burst by 300 points or tight spout by 100 points. So basically here they have made so that both AoEs on sword and blade get the bonuses. Now, let's be honest, most of the time everyone just spams fire burst like insane until you burn your mana to 0, like, because burst is just so spammable. And it has that weird buggy range, just like scimitars do, because you can use them mid-run and not being stopped while you run and while the skill is actually casted, because this is a instant release. Tight spout is already better for the PvP environment, especially in wars, where it's a mass group of players, so you can basically take out a lot of targets, and on top of that you get a lot of mortality. So again, here you get a lot more versatility, where you would actually gain, let's say, benefit from a blade. But overall looking, considering that Wizard is just so meta in PvP, and that basically it's all about speed and quick stuns and escape and spammable damage with Mortal, you really want Deep Spring Amulets. As much as I am fan of the damage amulets here, especially with spammable Fire Burst, it's just plain and simple better to run old amulets in Wizard, so you really cannot go wrong with that. Like, sure, if you want some, let's say if you are more so like a support wizard from a safe zone, or if you are not being directly targeted, you can always swap back to the damage amulets, which you are going to help you extremely a lot. But ultimately, if you run most of the time solo, which a lot of the wizards do because they can, as the super skill enabled them to be very meta, on top of the bonuses from the set, ultimately you want to run the old amulets. So we can see here that there are pros and cons where actually you want to run even old amulets still, like for fairy and for wizard. However, for those three classes where, especially for assassin and for monk, where you want to salvage the class to be working at the most optimal way and to have actually a use case and have a reason to run them in the first place, that's especially where you can run the new amulets. Tamer, again, you have a flexibility, but looking overall skill, like way bigger versatility is with new amulets than with the old amulets. So I hope this kind of cleared out to everybody that there's a place for every single amulet, as well as I've said for the rings, to be used at a specific time, so you cannot really go wrong by going one or another. Only way you can go wrong is by prioritizing either wrong amulet or a wrong ring, because unless you are really pushing your money down the GM's throats and maxing out amulets and rings in, like, I don't know, 20 days or something like that, you have to really choose wisely what is going to be your first priority as you level up, because ultimately it's going to depend whether you want to focus for PvP first or PvE first. But ultimately you have to remember one thing: without PvE you cannot start doing PvP. I'll leave the video there. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have fun.